Hey everyone, I'm going to share with us chapter 14, Gender and Leadership. I wanted to point out that in this chapter, there are two contributors, Stephanie Simon and Crystal Hoyt. So in this chapter, we have three research questions that we're going to be looking at. Do men and women lead differently? Are men more effective leaders? And why are women underrepresented in elite leadership roles? It used to be that it was called the glass ceiling, that was a barrier that women faced when trying to advance in a profession that was male dominated. But it is now called a leadership labyrinth. And it's called a labyrinth because it's like a maze it's a journey that's riddled with challenges all along the way. There are three reasons or three ways that we can understand the labyrinth. So the three ways we're going to look at is women's and men's investment in human capital, gender differences between men and women, and prejudice and discrimination against female leaders. So to start off with our first labyrinth, let's look at human capital. Human capital is one's assets like education, training, intelligence, skills, health, habits, and other things that are valuable to employers. So it's said that women do not have as much human capital. They lack the education needed, and this is not true. Women do receive higher education degrees. In fact, of all the bachelor's degrees received, 57% of them are awarded to women. 60% of the master's degrees were awarded to women, and 53% of the doctoral degrees were awarded to women. And these are recent statistics because our book, was published quite recently. Another theory would be that women have less experience in the field. They have less developmental opportunities, and therefore they're not qualified for leadership roles. And the reality is that, yes, they do have less experience, and it's because they are not allowed to receive developmental opportunities in some cases. For instance, a woman might not be invited to participate in job training or have some of the other opportunities offered just based on her gender. Women are less likely to be included in key networks that also provide some of these opportunities. And then finally, women have to confront major obstacles to establish mentor relationships. And of course, having a mentor is a great way to move forward with your profession. Another thing that comes up here, the third thing for human capital, is that women must respond to work and home conflicts or home conflicts. It's an and or. And they have to make choices that society does not expect for men to make. For instance, some women have to decide, I just won't get married and I won't have children. I'll focus on my profession. Other women say, you know what, I want it all. I'm going to try to be Superman, Superwoman, and I'm going to try to accomplish all of my goals. And then we also have moms who say, I just had a baby. I want to take maternity leave. I want to take 2 or 3 months off with my baby, or in some instances, a couple, 2 or 3 years. And so when the mother returns to her employment, she is lagging behind everyone else. And there's also a stigma that she might have another baby again. And so to start the problem all over again. So if she were a leader, that would be a bigger loss to the organization. So absence from employment does put women behind on the leadership track. And a great example of that was during COVID. More women lost their jobs than their male counterparts. And women were the ones who took responsibility for all the domestic things that were going on, for children suddenly being in the home, children needing to do their school studies at home. All of these were thrust upon the women because of the societal biases that we have about who the nurturer is in the home. And again, this time period off was a huge disruption to women's careers. And so this is a dramatic example for sure, but this is just an incidence that happens in women's professional lives. The next part of the labyrinth that we're going to look at is these gender differences. It is said that the leadership style and effectiveness of a leadership style is lacks as far as the woman is concerned. The myth is that women are just innately different from men, making them less effective as leaders. And the reality is that in the meta-analysis that there's a couple of them that we have in this chapter, it's argued that gender has little or no relationship to leadership style and effectiveness. One of the studies found that women lead in a more democratic way or a more participative way. And so that's different than the way that men lead. So sometimes it's perceived as less effective. But on the other hand, female leaders who try to lead in a more masculine way are looked down upon. And then the final statistic here is that when women are rated, women leaders are rated as less effective than men leaders when the majority of the raters are men. And so all of these things play out for female leaders. It's also a concern, is there a commitment? Is there enough motivation for women? And our empirical research shows that women are just as dedicated and motivated to paid employment as men are. This self-promotion and negotiation traits, this is kind of a tricky spot. Women are less likely than men to promote themselves for leadership positions. One reason is because if the majority of the people in the corporation are men, she doesn't expect to be able to have a lot of power to influence men, so she won't promote herself or won't negotiate for that position. Another thing is that women who promote themselves do so knowing that there's going to be some social costs and there's going to be some backlash, and so you have to juggle, would I like to do that or try to just focus on me? And then finally, women are less likely to negotiate for positions of leadership, and it's because they expect to face significant gender biases. But when looking at the gender picture, the second part of this labyrinth that we're in, our text says women are no less competent at leading than men are, and women are no less committed at their jobs or motivated for leadership roles. Research on leadership competencies seem to indicate a slight leadership competence advantage for women. So most of what we're looking at there are rumors and assumptions, stereotypes, biases, not truth. Okay, here we are at the third part of the labyrinth, and it is going to be stereotypes and prejudices. So stereotypes are cognitive shortcuts that influence the way people process information regarding groups and group members. This is interesting. The agentic characteristics of leadership versus the communal characteristics of leadership. So men are known more for being agentic leaders. The characteristics are confidence, assertiveness, independence. And women, on the other hand, their leadership is oftentimes shared by members in the community. There is a leader, but the leader empowers others to move forward. So it's a different style of leading. The characteristics of this style of leading are a concern for others, being helpful, being empathetic, being sensitive, and nurturing. So two completely different styles of leadership. This is an interesting scenario that was in the book. In the 1970s and 80s, the symphony orchestra was made up almost entirely by male musicians. And toward the end of the 80s, applicants began to audition for parts behind a screen or a curtain so that they could not be seen. They just played their instrument. When this happened, the proportion of women in the symphony orchestra increased significantly. And this just points out that just seeing a man evoked a gender bias, that the performance would be stronger. Here is a third thing to look at here. There's a thing called homosocial reproduction, and this is the tendency for a group to reproduce itself. People prefer similar others, people who are similar to themselves. And they're basically, when they're looking for someone to hire, for someone to lead, they're looking for a version of themselves. And this doesn't just explain why men are hiring men. It also explains the predominance of white men in leadership positions. We've got the race and the gender bias going on. And in terms of gender bias, it is interesting that some people have a double bias against them. A Black woman experiences both gender bias and race bias. However, she experiences the bias differently than a white woman and differently than a Black man. So that's another layer to look at. So here is how we can navigate this labyrinth. And again, when it's discussed in the beginning, it's, you know, a maze that you can't find your way out of, and you can't instruct other people how to get there once you've arrived. So here are some of the things that we can hope for with the labyrinth. Change is on the rise. The number of women who are able to survive the labyrinth is increasing. Organizations are beginning to value diversity in their leadership. Women are beginning to negotiate for roles at work and at home. Women who are unable or unwilling to conquer the labyrinth are creating their own businesses. And women in leadership roles are learning to balance and combine the authentic and communal characteristics of leadership style. So what are the strengths of gender and leadership theory? One strength is developing a more androgynous conception of leadership will enhance leadership effectiveness. Another strength is that understanding the labyrinth provides tools for people to being able to survive the labyrinth better. And then finally, the more research that is done, the easier it becomes to dispel some of these myths. And there's also some criticisms of gender and leadership theory. One of the criticisms is that change is not going to be able to happen in the work setting until changes begin happening in the home. And this is entirely true. Again, we saw this during COVID. Another criticism is that more research needs to be done for women who are facing both the gender and the race bias. Our African-American women, Latino women, Asian women are facing this double gender bias against them and against them progressing. And finally, the third criticism is that most of the current research that we have, it just shows the Western world. It's not global. So it needs to expand a little bit more. So really interesting chapter. I have enjoyed studying it. Moving on, I want to talk about the case study that I looked at. This case study was the first one. And it is about a woman. Her name is Lisa Weber, and she's a talented graduate of a prestigious business school. Her accomplishments exceed her workmates. She's a stellar employee. She is very deserving of making partner, which has been her goal for most of her adult life. Unfortunately, a man who was hired after Lisa Weber was offered the partnership. So Lisa tried to have some productive conversations with senior partners, asking, you know, what can I do? How can things get better for me? And there were no positive results from those conversations. Some of the things that Lisa endured, she was often belittled during weekly staff meetings. It wasn't uncommon to begin the meeting with, okay, let's get Lisa up to speed here so we can move forward. Lisa was hopeful that if she just kept performing well and not rocking the boat, that would be the best way to handle the situation, but it absolutely wasn't. Eventually, there was a second woman hired into this firm, and one day a junior partner walks into the staff area and sees these two women, and he says, "Hey guys, two women in one room, that's scary." A comment that is just like completely inappropriate, and we can't even think of what the opposite comment would have been had there been two men in the room with a group of women. So Lisa finally realizes things are not going to change for me. This firm is never going to change. And so she quit her job and formed her own business. So the questions that were looked at in 14.1 was name some of these advancement barriers that Lisa faced. And one of them was the homosocial reproduction. When she did speak to a senior partner, he just basically said, "Lisa, look, no one here wants to see a woman as a leader, not the senior partners and not our customers. You are not going to make partner forever." He just, came right out and told her that our clients would not be comfortable with a female leader. She also faced some prejudice. She was less likely to be included into the key networks. She was singled out at her staff meetings. And then, another thing that happened for her was oftentimes men in the firm would come into her office and discuss cases and get her advice and her opinion on things that were going down. But when they spoke of these things later, they verbalized her ideas without giving credit to her. So even though she was helping, she was trying to network, it just didn't happen for her. And that leads us to question number 2, how could this situation have been handled differently? And quite frankly, I just didn't see how it could be handled differently. She did everything that she possibly could. I guess she could have been more assertive and more demanding, and call some of these men out on the way they were treating her. But ultimately, the men in this firm were just too biased and prejudiced to accept that a woman was capable of making senior partner, capable of doing the work, even though the numbers were right in front of them. And finally, the third question, what adjustments could have been implemented to reduce the gender bias? Again, nothing that Lisa had control of. That there was nothing was going to happen in that firm, short of her filing a lawsuit against them for the way that they treated her. But then this would not be a great situation, a great place for her to work while a lawsuit's going on. So Lisa leaving to form her own business firm was probably I think the best thing that she could do. So it's kind of a sad case study, and I feel like it's not an unusual case study. So to tie in to this chapter, the article that I found, I absolutely love it because it focuses on the fact that men and women both have strengths. And when those strengths come together, then they're able to accomplish more. So what we're looking at here is an article called Women, the Future of Humankind Peace Can and Will Be Made by the Transformative Power of Female Negotiators. Great article written not long ago. It is from the Palestine-Israel Journal of Politics. And Amar, again, she says, including women and allowing them to use their strengths and powers is going to help with negotiations. She says that when women are allowed in the negotiation process, there is a broader range of perspectives, and it enhances the ability of peacemaking. She goes on to say, in the past, men have been perceived as protectors, and they're going to go off to the war to protect. And women, on the other hand, were victims, or they were just supposed to be strong when they lost a husband or lost a son. They were supposed to be strong because that's what needed to happen. But in reality, we don't have a woman who's strong back at the house. while the war is going on. In most incidences, there are women surviving in these war-torn countries. And unfortunately, in some instances around the world, women are used as pawns. They're taken as hostage. They're violated, they're killed. And women are living in the fray with their children and trying to survive with extreme loss going on all around them. And the author suggests, based on statistics from the United Nations, that these experiences have actually emboldened and empowered women and enabled them in their peacemaking skills. Pretty interesting stuff. So anyway, just a couple little statistics that came from this. I think my statistics were on the back page, but let me just go back to that really quickly. Yes, right here. If women are present in negotiations, there's a 20% chance that it's more likely that peace will be sustained for 2 years. And if they go beyond the 2 years, then there's a 35% chance that peace will continue up to 15 years. And this is when women are allowed at the table to help negotiate. The United Nations have done statistics, formed branches that support women. I didn't list everything in my little summary. I'm just gonna leave it. I won't tell you all the little things that have been formed to encourage more women to join the United Nations and be a part of peacemaking and negotiations. But ultimately, the author is saying we need a paradigm shift. We need to move away from women being back at the house, being protected, and recognize the powers and the value that comes to the table and the complement that comes to the table when the way that a man leads and the way that a woman leads, or the way that they work together, increases the power and ability versus there's one better than another. So it's a great article. I absolutely loved reading it. I thought it was a perfect complement to this. Her final quote, the final thing that she says in this article is, "Great women do not always stand behind the greatest men. This is an era in which both men and women are standing side by side, creating a better world together." So anyway, awesome stuff. Here's my works cited. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Let's see how easy it is for me to figure out how to get out of my meeting. Bye.